What if I told you an entire generation didn't fail, but was quietly set up to feel lost from the very beginning? Not because they're weak, not because they lack discipline, not because they don't want success badly enough, but because they grew up inside a world that changed faster than the human mind could realistically adapt to. A world where the rules kept shifting, where expectations became unclear, where the definition of a good life stopped being stable, and no one ever stopped to explain what that would do to you. So instead, people internalized it. They blamed themselves for the confusion. They thought they were the problem. If you're part of this generation, if you've ever felt like you're drifting behind or unsure of where you're going, this might not just resonate with you. It might finally explain you. One of the defining struggles of this generation isn't confusion, it's something deeper. It's the instability of identity itself. In the past, identity was something you gradually grew into. You were shaped by your environment, your community, your culture. There were fewer variables, fewer inputs. Even if those systems were flawed, they provided structure. People generally knew what adulthood looked like. They knew what success meant. They had a clearer sense of where they stood and where they were going today. That structure has dissolved. Now, from a very young age, you're exposed to an overwhelming range of possibilities, different lifestyles, different belief systems, different ways of thinking, living, succeeding, all at once, all competing for your attention. Instead of discovering who you are within a stable context, you're asked to define yourself in a limitless one, and that changes everything. Identity is no longer something you grow into, it becomes something you must constantly analyze, question, and refine. Every choice starts to feel permanent, every decision feels like it defines who you are, and every alternative feels like a version of life you might be missing out on. Psychologists refer to this as identity diffusion, a state where commitment feels risky because choosing one path means closing off countless others. So instead of committing, people hesitate. They stay in between versions of themselves, not fully becoming anything, but never fully settling either. You see it everywhere in careers. People constantly second-guessing their direction, in relationships, uncertain whether they've found the right person. In values, shifting beliefs based on what feels most aligned in the moment. Even hobbies become part of this. People don't just ask, "Do I enjoy this?" They ask, "Does this fit the identity I'm trying to build?" And when your sense of self becomes something you're always editing, always comparing, always optimizing, it stops feeling natural. You don't feel grounded, you don't feel certain. You don't even feel like a finished person. You feel like a draft, an unfinished idea that could still become anything, but never quite become something. This generation didn't just grow up using technology, it was shaped by it at a neurological level. The human brain is designed around reward systems. Dopamine isn't about pleasure, it's about anticipation. It drives motivation, it pushes you toward goals. But there's a catch. That system evolved in a world where rewards were slow, effort-based, and relatively scarce. Now, those conditions don't exist anymore. Today, digital environments provide constant stimulation, short-form videos, endless scrolling, notifications, likes, new content every second, tailored specifically to keep your attention. The brain adapts to this. It starts expecting high levels of stimulation all the time. And over time, this creates a gap. Because real life doesn't work that way. Real life is slower. Learning a skill takes repetition. Building something meaningful takes time. Relationships deepen gradually. Progress is often invisible in the moment. There are long stretches where nothing exciting happens, and that's normal. But to a brain conditioned by instant rewards, that normal pace feels like a problem. It feels like boredom. It feels like lack of progress. It feels like something is missing. So things that should feel meaningful start to feel empty, not because they lack value, but because they don't deliver immediate stimulation. This creates a quiet, internal disconnect. You still want meaning, you still want growth, you still want purpose, but your brain has been trained to associate value with immediacy, so when something doesn't feel instantly rewarding, you start to lose motivation. Not consciously, subtly, gradually, until you find yourself asking a question that feels heavier than it should. Why does nothing feel worth it anymore? That question isn't a reflection of reality, it's a reflection of conditioning. Meaning hasn't disappeared, it's just been overshadowed. Buried beneath a system that rewards speed, novelty, and constant input, And until you recognize that, you'll keep mistaking overstimulation for fulfillment and silence for emptiness. Comparison has always existed, but it used to have limits. You compared yourself to people in your immediate environment, your classmates, your co-workers, your community. Now, those limits are gone. Today, you're exposed to thousands of people every day. People from different countries, industries, lifestyles, people at completely different stages of life, and most importantly, people presenting highly curated versions of themselves. You're not seeing reality, you're seeing highlights. Moments of success, filtered and refined, achievements without context, confidence without the uncertainty behind it. But your brain doesn't fully separate that. It processes what you see as a valid comparison, and this leads to something called chronic upward comparison. You're constantly measuring yourself against people who appear ahead of you, more successful, more attractive, more disciplined, more certain. Even if those impressions aren't accurate, they still shape how you feel. Over time, this distorts your perception. Your own progress starts to feel small, your achievements feel delayed, your life feels like it's lagging behind an invisible timeline, and this creates a quiet but persistent pressure. I should be further ahead by now. The problem is there is no clear definition of ahead anymore. There's no single path, no shared timeline. Standards constantly shift based on what you're exposed to. One moment, success looks like financial freedom. The next, it looks like creative fulfillment. Then it becomes travel, relationships, status, independence. It never settles. So no matter what you achieve, it doesn't feel final. It doesn't feel enough. Because there's always another version of success being presented to you. And when progress doesn't feel real, effort starts to feel exhausting. Not because you're failing, but because your mind never registers that you're moving forward. You're running without ever feeling like you're arriving. This generation was raised on a powerful idea. You can be anything, and on the surface, that sounds empowering. Limitless potential, unlimited freedom, endless opportunity. But there's a side to this that no one talks about, because when everything is possible, nothing feels certain. Without clear paths, every decision becomes heavier. There's no obvious right option, no guaranteed direction, only possibilities, each one carrying risk, uncertainty, and doubt. And every choice you make comes with an invisible cost, all the other paths you didn't take. This is known as the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it becomes to choose, and even after choosing, satisfaction decreases, because you're aware of everything you left behind. So instead of feeling confident, people feel stuck. They overthink. They delay decisions. They wait for clarity that never fully arrives, and even when they do choose, the questioning doesn't stop. Was this the right decision? What if I'm wasting time? What if there's something better I'm missing? Freedom starts to feel like pressure, responsibility, without guidance and without structure, without constraints, without a clear sense of direction. Possibility turns into anxiety because humans don't just need options, they need meaning, they need boundaries, they need something to move toward. Without that, you don't feel empowered, you feel lost. So if you've been feeling lost, if you've been questioning yourself, your direction, your identity, if you felt like you're behind, drifting, or not living up to some invisible standard, maybe it's not because you're broken, maybe it's because you were placed in an environment that made clarity difficult, a world with too much noise, too many choices, too much comparison, and not enough stillness to understand yourself. Maybe the confusion you feel isn't failure, maybe it's awareness, because for the first time, you're not blindly following a path that was handed to you. You're noticing the gaps, the contradictions, the lack of direction that others assumed was normal, and that awareness feels uncomfortable. But it's also where something real begins, because beneath all the noise there is a quieter space, a space where you're not reacting to expectations, not comparing yourself to everyone else, not trying to optimize every version of your life, just observing, questioning, deciding. And in that space, you get something this generation was rarely given, the chance to choose deliberately. Not who you're supposed to be, not who looks successful from the outside, but who you actually want to become. And maybe being lost isn't the end of the path. Maybe it's the moment you finally step off someone else's and begin your own.